Welcome, beautiful Sigma ladies. Greatness is not always seen. It is often endured. That line cuts deeper than most people want to admit, because the truth is, some of the most extraordinary women on this planet are the very ones who can't even recognize the weight of their own brilliance. Studies show that people who operate at higher levels of resilience and independence often downplay their own achievements, convincing themselves it was just survival or nothing special. Sigma women are the perfect embodiment of this paradox. The stronger they become, the less they believe it's remarkable. It's almost ironic. While others write essays about their smallest wins, the Sigma woman can endure storms, build empires of solitude, and walk away from people who would break most hearts, and still wonder if she's done anything worthwhile. She shrugs off what others would tattoo across their foreheads. And maybe that's her hidden joke on the world. While everyone else is busy selling their greatness, she's too busy living it, completely blind to the fact that she's already become the story. This is why Sigma women can't see their own greatness, not because it isn't there, but because it's woven so deeply into their everyday existence that they mistake power for normalcy, resilience for routine, and brilliance for just another Tuesday. Number 1. They're too future-oriented to pause. Sigma women live in a state of constant forward motion, and that's both their gift and their curse. The moment they accomplish something that would leave others celebrating for weeks, they've already shifted their focus to the next horizon. It's not that they don't value their progress. It's that they rarely stop long enough to acknowledge it. Their mind is always running ahead, sketching the next challenge, the next mountain, the next standard they need to meet. For them, yesterday's triumph is already old news, and pausing to admire it feels almost wasteful. This way of living creates a strange blindness to their own greatness. Others see their resilience, their capacity to walk through fire and still keep their composure, and they're left in awe. But the Sigma woman doesn't linger on those moments. She's too busy thinking, what's next? How do I become better? What more can I do? She's always chasing an ever-moving target, and because she's wired this way, she never feels like she's arrived. The finish line is always disappearing into the distance. Part of this comes from her deep self-reliance. She doesn't want applause, so she doesn't measure her worth by it. But without external recognition and without giving herself credit, she's left with nothing but the constant hum of not enough yet. This fuels her growth, yes, but it also traps her in an endless cycle of striving. Greatness becomes invisible when it's overshadowed by the obsession with what hasn't been achieved. What makes it almost tragic and a little darkly humorous is that she doesn't even realize she's running laps around people who gave up long ago. While others are sitting comfortably at the halfway mark, congratulating themselves, she's miles ahead, frowning at how much farther she has to go. To her, the gap doesn't look like success. It looks like distance still untraveled. And so, while the world sees an extraordinary woman who's always several steps beyond, she only sees the unfinished work. That's why Sigma women rarely feel the weight of their own greatness. Their lives are lived in constant pursuit, never in pause. They move too quickly to notice the footprints they've left behind, footprints that, to everyone else, already look like the path of a legend. Number 2, they can't observe themselves in action. Sigma women are often unaware of the very effect they have on the world because they can't experience themselves the way others do. To the people around them, their presence feels steady, composed, and magnetic. There's a kind of poise in the way they carry themselves, a quiet restraint that commands attention without needing to demand it. People sense their unshakable calm and mistake it for deliberate control, when in truth the Sigma woman doesn't feel calm at all. Inside, she's often wrestling with doubts, calculating her next move or processing emotions she'll never show on her face. This is where the disconnect lies. Others are reading the finished performance, while she's only aware of the rehearsal behind the curtain. She feels the storm, not the stillness. She feels the flaws, not the polish. So while the world stands back in awe at her self-possession, she assumes it's nothing special, because she knows how much noise is happening in her own head. It's the same with leadership and influence. People naturally look to her as an anchor, someone who doesn't crumble when pressure is high. They admire her ability to remain composed in situations that would make most people unravel. Yet she doesn't experience it that way. From her perspective, she's just holding it together, or doing what has to be done. She doesn't feel like a role model. She feels like someone trying not to collapse. What she misses is that greatness isn't about being flawless on the inside. It's about what others experience on the outside. And in that sense, her ability to project stability while enduring inner chaos is exactly what makes her extraordinary. But because she can't step outside herself and witness it, she downplays it, dismissing her impact as ordinary. That blindness is part of why Sigma women so often underestimate their own greatness. They don't realize that what they see as just surviving the storm looks to everyone else like unshakable strength. They don't realize that their quiet, composed presence has a ripple effect on every room they enter. In chasing what they think greatness should feel like, they overlook the reality. They're already living it, even if they can't see it from the inside. Number 3, they distrust ease. Sigma women have a complicated relationship with anything that comes easily to them. If they didn't have to sweat blood for it, they instinctively downplay its value. Charisma, they shrug it off as just talking. Insight, they chalk it up to just noticing things. Resilience, to them, it's just surviving. What looks like rare brilliance to others feels like common sense to them because it's woven into who they are. And when something feels natural, they distrust it, almost as if ease cancels out legitimacy. This makes them blind to their own greatness because they equate worth with struggle. If they didn't bleed for it, they can't imagine it's worthy of admiration. Meanwhile, other people are flawed by the very qualities the Sigma woman overlooks. A room falls silent when she speaks, but she assumes anyone could do that. She can navigate solitude with dignity, but she sees it as simply being herself. She rises after setbacks as if nothing happened, but instead of labeling that as resilience, she calls it moving on. The irony is that her refusal to value ease is exactly what makes her unique. Most people spend their lives trying to fake what she does naturally. They rehearse confidence. She just exists and exudes it. They overthink their words. She speaks with the kind of clarity that lands without effort. They collapse under pressure. She seems to bend but never break. To others, these qualities look like hard-won trophies. To her, they feel like background noise. This distrust of ease is partly protective. She doesn't want to be seen as someone who takes shortcuts or gets by on luck. She wants her victories to be earned, tested, and undeniable. But the hidden cost is that she ends up rejecting the very qualities that make her extraordinary. If it feels natural, she assumes it must not matter. And so her greatness slips through her own hands, unseen, even as everyone else is captivated by it. In a way, this blind spot is the Sigma woman's paradox. The very traits she undervalues are the ones people admire most. She's too busy dismissing her natural brilliance to realize that what feels effortless to her is exactly what makes her unforgettable. Number 4, they don't feel the weight. Others feel around them. Sigma women move through the world carrying a weight they themselves cannot feel. To the people around them, their presence can be disarming, magnetic, or even intimidating. Someone might find themselves suddenly tongue-tied in their company, or strangely inspired just by the way they hold themselves in silence. Their energy has a gravitational pull. It shifts the air in a room, sharpens people's focus, and makes their words echo louder than they realize. Yet the Sigma woman doesn't experience any of this. To her, she's simply existing. She's not trying to command attention, and because she feels no effort behind it, she assumes no real impact is being made. This disconnect is what blinds her to her own greatness. People feel her aura in ways she'll never directly experience. They sense the restraint in her calmness, the conviction in her independence, the quiet storm in her silence. But she only feels the ordinariness of her day-to-day life, the chaos of her inner thoughts, or the weariness of her battles. Since she doesn't feel the ripple effect of her presence, she assumes there is none. It's almost ironic. She thinks she blends into the background, while others can't shake her from their minds after one encounter. She sees herself as just another person in the crowd, while to someone else she was the turning point, the muse, or the standard they now measure themselves against. What's invisible to her is unforgettable to others. Part of the reason is humility, but part of it is survival. Sigma women don't walk into rooms calculating their effect on people. They walk in focused on what they need to do, or on conserving their own energy. They're not seeking to be memorable, so when others treat them like they are, it feels confusing or even unbelievable. And because they don't feel the weight of their own pull, they dismiss it altogether, chalking it up to coincidence or exaggeration. The truth, however, is that her impact is real, and it lingers long after she's gone. But because the Sigma woman lives inside her own skin, feeling only the storm of her inner world, she never fully sees the quiet authority others experience in her presence. That gap between how she feels and how others feel around her is exactly why she can't recognize the greatness she already carries. Number 5. They're obsessed with flaws. Others don't see. Sigma women have a way of dissecting themselves that borders on ruthless. No matter how remarkable the bigger picture looks, their eyes immediately lock on the one imperfection no one else even noticed. It could be a single word they stumbled over in a flawless presentation, a tiny scar hidden beneath layers of beauty, or a minor detail in a project that still left everyone else speechless. To her, that crack overshadows the entire masterpiece. She doesn't see the brilliance, only the blemish. This obsession with flaws isn't about insecurity in the shallow sense. It's about her relentless standard for herself. She can't tolerate the idea of almost perfect. If something isn't exact, it feels worthless in her mind. That's why, while others are applauding, she's silently replaying the one mistake that ruined it for her. The crowd sees architecture that belongs in a museum. She sees the crooked stone near the foundation. The danger of this mindset is that it robs her of the ability to see her own greatness. While most people elevate their strengths and quietly bury their weaknesses, she flips it. She minimizes her triumphs and amplifies her flaws until the scale is completely skewed. Even her successes feel like failures because they never match the standard she sets in her head. What makes this even more brutal is how invisible her flaws actually are to others. The crack in the wall she's agonizing over. No one else ever saw it, or if they did, they forgot it within seconds, overwhelmed by everything else she created. But she can't let it go. It becomes the lens through which she views the entire effort, convincing her she hasn't achieved much at all. In a twisted way, this obsession keeps her sharp. It pushes her to refine, improve, and evolve endlessly. But it also blinds her to the reality that she's already operating at a level most people can't even touch. Her flaw-finding gaze keeps her trapped in a loop of dissatisfaction, making her incapable of recognizing just how extraordinary she already is. So while the world stands stunned at her architecture, the Sigma woman keeps staring at the crack, convinced the whole structure is about to collapse. What she doesn't realize is that the very flaw she's fixating on is what proves she's human. and her greatness was never dependent on perfection in the first place. Number 6. They mistake survival for normalcy. Sigma women have an uncanny ability to survive storms that would break most people into pieces. They've walked through betrayals, loneliness, setbacks, and moments of complete isolation, and yet they come out the other side still standing. But here's the paradox. They don't see that endurance as strength. To them, it wasn't courage, resilience, or greatness. It was simply survival. It was doing what needed to be done to get through another day. That mindset is what blinds them to their own power. Where most people would have collapsed, they pushed forward. Where others would have begged for rescue, they relied on themselves. Where others would have carried their scars like excuses, they treated them like part of the scenery. But because this survival became their normal, they no longer recognize how extraordinary it really was. What looks like heroism from the outside feels like routine from the inside. This is why people often admire them, while they shrug in disbelief. A friend might marvel at how she rebuilt her life after heartbreak, or how she carved her own path without support. But to her, there's nothing to admire. She wasn't trying to be strong, she was just trying not to drown. That distinction is everything, because in her mind, greatness requires choice, not necessity. And survival never felt like a choice, it felt like the only option. The irony is brutal. The very moments that prove her greatness are the ones she erases. She credits survival to circumstance, not to her own willpower. And because she downplays it, she never fully honors the depth of what she's endured. Yet, those who witness her can see it clearly. They see the resilience etched into her calm, the strength behind her independence, the quiet courage in her silence. What she calls normal is actually what sets her apart. It's the quiet proof that she can withstand what others can't. But until she redefines survival as something more than just what had to be done, she'll keep dismissing her most powerful trait. And that's the tragic beauty of the Sigma woman. Her greatness hides in plain sight, buried beneath her own refusal to label survival as extraordinary. Number 7. They normalize the extraordinary. Sigma women have a habit of turning the extraordinary into the ordinary. What most people would find intimidating, exhausting, or downright impossible becomes part of their everyday rhythm. Solitude that would drive others insane? For them, it's just peace, a level of discipline most can't sustain for more than a week. For them, it's simply how life is lived. Intellectual depth that overwhelms conversations for others. For them, it's just how their mind naturally works. And because these things feel so normal, they don't register them as powerful. They dismiss them as just who I am, never realizing that what's casual for them is rare for everyone else. This normalization is what blinds them to their own greatness. A Sigma woman doesn't recognize that her comfort with being alone is a form of strength. She doesn't see that her self-discipline, her ability to walk away from what doesn't serve her, or her hunger for knowledge are traits most people only wish they had. Since these qualities don't require visible effort, she assumes they don't count. In her mind, greatness has to be a struggle, something hard won. If it comes naturally, it must not be extraordinary. The irony is that others are watching in awe, completely aware of how rare those qualities are. They see her disappearing for months and returning sharper than ever, and they can't believe she thrives in solitude where most would wither. They see her resisting temptations that derail everyone else, and they marvel at her consistency. They see her depth of thought and wonder how someone can process life at such a piercing level. Yet she doesn't feel any of this as remarkable. To her, it's just routine. This is the Sigma paradox. By normalizing the extraordinary, she strips it of its value. The very things that make her exceptional become invisible to her, because they don't feel like achievements. They feel like breathing. And so, while the world sees her as powerful, mysterious, and unshakably rare, she sees herself as simply living life. Her greatness hides in plain sight, tucked inside habits and instincts she doesn't think twice about. But to everyone else, those same instincts are proof of a woman operating on a level few can ever reach. That's the quiet brilliance of the Sigma woman. She underestimates herself because what's rare for others is her normal. Number 8. They outgrow their own standards too quickly. Sigma women are relentless when it comes to growth, but that relentlessness comes with a hidden cost. They outgrow their own standards too quickly. The moment they reach a goal, the celebration lasts seconds before they're already planning the next, higher one. What was once a mountain becomes a molehill the instant they've conquered it. Instead of pausing to honor the climb, they treat it like the warm-up for something bigger. This mindset makes them blind to their own greatness. To everyone else, their achievements look monumental, but to them, it feels like just the starting line. They don't allow themselves to feel accomplished because the definition of success keeps shifting. Yesterday's triumph is today's baseline, and tomorrow it won't even count. They move the goalpost so fast that they never actually arrive. Part of this comes from their refusal to stagnate. A Sigma woman hates comfort zones, so as soon as she feels herself settling into one, she tears it apart and builds another. While others would be satisfied coasting at a certain level, she's already dismantling the old standard and raising the bar. It's what makes her extraordinary, but also what keeps her perpetually unsatisfied. The irony is that she often underestimates how far ahead she actually is. While she's frowning at how much farther she needs to go, most people haven't even started the journey she's already sprinted through. She doesn't realize she's operating on a level others can't even imagine, because her gaze is fixed on the horizon, not on the trail behind her. To her, progress feels like a chase, not a victory. This inability to pause is what robs her of perspective. She never stands still long enough to look at how much ground she's covered. She doesn't see that she's already doing what most people call impossible, because she's too focused on the next impossible thing. Greatness doesn't feel like greatness when it's always being redefined. And that's the paradox. Her drive keeps her evolving, but it also keeps her blind. She doesn't notice that she's been outpacing the world all along, because the moment she reaches one summit, she convinces herself it was never a summit at all. It was just step one. That's why she rarely feels her own greatness. It's always been swallowed up by the next standard waiting to be shattered. Number 9. They're addicted to their own autocritique. Sigma women are their own harshest critics, and it's not a passing habit, it's an addiction. The moment they achieve something, before the applause even begins, their minds are already dissecting it. Instead of standing still and letting the victory sink in, they're busy analyzing every angle, every flaw, every missed detail. By the time others are calling it brilliant, she's already convinced herself it could have been cleaner, sharper, or more precise. This self-dismantling makes her blind to her own greatness. Most people would ride the high of an achievement for weeks, but the Sigma woman rarely gives herself even a minute. It's as if she's allergic to satisfaction. Every win is treated like a rough draft, not a masterpiece. She doesn't bask in her accomplishments. She breaks them down with surgical precision, looking for cracks only she can see. Part of this comes from her unshakable standards. She doesn't measure success by comparison to others. She measures it against the best version of herself she can imagine. That imagined self is always 10 steps ahead, so no matter what she achieves, it falls short in her eyes. The bar is always just out of reach, and she never lets herself forget it. The result is a constant loop of self-critique. Where others see excellence, she sees unfinished business. Where others see progress, she sees flaws that need fixing. Even when she's miles ahead of the crowd, she feels like she's lagging behind because she's chasing an ideal that keeps moving further away. What makes this paradox almost tragic is that her autocritique fuels her brilliance, but it also poisons it. It sharpens her, keeps her evolving, and ensures she never grows complacent, but it also robs her of joy, leaving her unable to experience her own victories as victories. She builds castles, then immediately points out the cracks in the walls. To outsiders, her achievements look like proof of greatness. To her, they look like rough sketches that still need work. That's why Sigma women often can't see their own power. They're too busy picking apart the very masterpieces that the rest of the world is still standing back to admire. Number 10. They judge themselves on invisible battles. Sigma women fight battles no one else ever sees, and those invisible wars become the only scoreboard they trust. While the outside world applauds their achievements, whether it's resilience in hardship, intellectual brilliance, or the ability to navigate life alone with grace, the Sigma woman doesn't measure herself by those visible victories. Instead, she judges herself by the private wars raging in her mind. Her worth isn't tied to the awards or outcomes others can see, but to how well she manages her self-discipline, how fiercely she wrestles with doubt, and how tightly she controls emotions that threaten to spill over. The problem is that these kinds of wars are never fully won. Self-discipline isn't a finish line. It's a daily grind. Inner conflicts don't disappear overnight. They evolve, reappear, and change shape. Suppressed emotions don't vanish. They lurk beneath the surface, waiting for moments of weakness. Because these struggles are ongoing, she convinces herself that she's always falling short. From her perspective, the mere existence of those battles means she's not strong enough yet, not whole enough yet, not great enough yet. What makes this tragic is the contrast between perception and reality. Others see her as unshakable, someone who never cracks under pressure. They see the results, the calm demeanor, the sharp insights, the ability to hold everything together. But she doesn't feel that strength internally. She only feels the struggle, the constant push to maintain control, the mental tug-of-war between who she is and who she wants to be. Where others see stability, she feels chaos. Where others see power, she sees vulnerability. That's why greatness slips past her. She's too focused on the unfinished wars inside her head to recognize how extraordinary it is to keep fighting at all. Survival looks like failure when you expect perfection. Persistence feels like weakness when you demand victory. She forgets that the very act of continuing those battles day after day is itself a form of greatness, one most people couldn't sustain for even a moment. In the end, the Sigma woman doesn't give herself credit because she doesn't see the visible trophies others see. She only sees the wars that never end. And as long as she measures herself against battles no one ever wins completely, she'll keep mistaking her endurance for failure, when in truth, it's the clearest proof of her strength. Number 11. They're desensitized to praise. For Sigma women, praise rarely lands the way it's intended. Compliments don't sink in. They slide right off. When someone tells them they're brilliant, strong, or inspiring, they instinctively question the motive behind the words. Is it just politeness? Exaggeration? Flattery meant to soften them up for something else? Instead of absorbing the praise, they dissect it, searching for the hidden subtext. And once they decide it's not fully genuine, the compliment loses all of its weight. This habit leaves them almost immune to external validation. What could have been fuel for confidence becomes background noise. Friends, colleagues, or partners might pour admiration onto them, but in the Sigma woman's mind, it never proves much. If it comes too easily, she doubts it. If it sounds too polished, she dismisses it. If it feels too generic, she ignores it altogether. Over time, she becomes desensitized to it, conditioned to strip any compliment of its power before it can take root. Ironically, this disbelief in praise doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from deep self-reliance. Sigma women trust their own judgment above anyone else's, and that includes the judgment of their worth. They hold themselves to standards so high that outside compliments feel mismatched. When someone applauds their success, she's already thinking of the mistakes she made along the way. When someone calls her strong, she remembers the nights she felt like breaking. Praise feels hollow because it never matches the full truth she carries inside. The result is a strange disconnect. The world sees a woman worth admiring, but she doesn't absorb that admiration enough to recognize her own greatness. It bounces off, leaving her just as critical and unsatisfied as before. Meanwhile, those who praise her can feel baffled. Why doesn't she see what everyone else sees? Why doesn't it stick? But that's the paradox of the Sigma woman. By distrusting the voices around her, she protects herself from empty flattery, but she also blocks out genuine recognition. In her refusal to let praise define her, she ends up denying herself the chance to feel her own impact. And so, her greatness stays invisible to her, even as it's obvious to everyone else watching. Number 12. They compare against imagined selves, not people. Sigma women don't play the comparison game the way most people do. While others measure themselves against friends, colleagues, or rivals, the Sigma woman sets her sights on someone far more elusive, her imagined self. Not the version she is today, not the version others admire, but the perfected version that lives only in her mind. This phantom self is sharper, calmer, more disciplined, more accomplished, more everything. And because that version doesn't actually exist, she always feels unfinished when measured against it. This creates a cycle where no amount of achievement ever feels like enough. She can be miles ahead of her peers and still feel like she's behind because she's not chasing people. She's chasing an ideal. When others say, "You've done so much," she silently thinks, "Not compared to who I should be by now." That phantom becomes the ultimate benchmark, and it's one she can never truly reach. The danger here is that she doesn't realize how distorted this internal measurement is. It makes her underestimate her greatness because she's comparing real, tangible progress to an impossible standard. Every success gets reframed as not quite there. Every milestone becomes just another reminder of how far she is from that imagined self. While others see extraordinary discipline, depth, and independence, she sees only the gap between her reality and her potential. What makes this paradox even harsher is that her imagined self evolves as she evolves. The moment she gets close to embodying it, the image shifts higher, farther, and more demanding. The perfectionist inside her won't let her win. The goalpost moves endlessly, so she never gets the satisfaction of catching up. And yet, this is also what drives her growth. That phantom self keeps her moving, stretching, and refusing to stagnate. It fuels her brilliance, but it also blinds her. She can't see how far ahead she already is, because she's staring at a version of herself that doesn't and will never exist. That's why Sigma women so often underestimate their own greatness. They're not losing to other people. They're losing to a ghost, one designed by their own imagination. And against that phantom, they'll always feel like they haven't arrived, even though the rest of the world already sees them as extraordinary. Sigma women are extraordinary in ways few can fully grasp, yet they remain the most blind to their own brilliance. Every trait that sets them apart, their independence, resilience, discipline, intellectual depth, and quiet power, is a double-edged sword. They outgrow their own standards too quickly, dissect their wins before anyone can admire them, and measure themselves against phantoms of perfection that exist only in their minds. They normalize the extraordinary, survive battles invisible to the world, and bear sacrifices that make every achievement taste bittersweet. They distrust ease, downplay praise, and cannot feel the weight their presence carries. And yet, this relentless self-scrutiny, this constant push for more, is precisely what makes them unforgettable. Their greatness isn't loud or performative, it's quiet, deeply felt by everyone who encounters them, and impossible to ignore once noticed. The paradox is brutal. The very qualities that leave others in awe are the ones they dismiss, the traits that make them legends are the ones they fear, and the victories that would inspire celebration are the ones they mourn in silence. The truth is simple but often invisible to them. Sigma women have always been operating on a level most people can't even comprehend. They don't need recognition to be remarkable, and their brilliance doesn't require acknowledgement to exist. The world may see them as legends, as forces of nature, as the rare few who leave an indelible mark, but they themselves experience only the storm inside, the endless striving, the hidden battles, and the quiet sacrifices. And that is the ultimate irony. Their greatness is not in what they claim for themselves, but in how deeply they affect the world while barely noticing it. They are the women who quietly shift the lives around them, inspire awe without effort, and endure what most could not imagine, all while believing they are just surviving. Sigma women can't see their own greatness, but the truth remains. It has always been there, undeniable, extraordinary, and entirely theirs. If you found this insight into Sigma women captivating, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into human behavior and extraordinary personalities. Like the video if it resonated with you, comment below with your thoughts or experiences, and share it with anyone who needs to understand the hidden brilliance of Sigma women. Your support helps us keep bringing content that cuts deeper and reveals truths few dare to explore.